Hello and welcome back to Key Comic Universe. I'm back here today with another discussion video. But before I get into it, please like, comment, and subscribe. If you're not already subscribed, I would highly recommend it. And check me out on Instagram at Key Comic Universe. So, for today's discussion video, we're going to be talking about why are comic collections so overpriced? You may have experienced this in the past, where someone's selling a comic collection, whether it's online, in person, whatever it may be, and you're like, that price doesn't really seem that right. It seems a little bit high. And there's a lot of factors to consider when you're looking at comic book collections. And the kind of idea of this video is to say, don't buy a comic collection if you really want just because it's overpriced. Like, you had to take into consideration, hey, if I'm going to sell this, am I going to lose money? Which a lot of people aren't. And then also, can I get these comic books elsewhere for cheaper? Like, sure, it's all in one place. Sure, it's convenient. But you go out there online, you're able to get off of one website, like let's say My Comic Shop or eBay or whatever it may be, for less, then there's no point to buying that collection. So this is kind of video going over the most common reasons. So first off, of course, there will always be people who inherit, buy at one point in time who know nothing about comics or know very little, and they're like, oh, I know comics are worth money. I see these crazy stories where people are able to sell their books for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. I bet these comic books are worth the same amount. And a lot of times that's people who, and same with, you can also say people invested into comics in the 1990s. You know, they got their 50 copies of X-Men 1. They've got a bunch of Superman, like 17. I think that's the correct issue. Let me know if I'm wrong. I'm horrible with issue numbers sometimes. But let's just say X-Men 1 or Spawn 1. They go out there and they buy 50 copies or 100 copies or whatever it may be. And they're like, okay, cool. I'm going to wait, let's say 30 years. And when I go to sell it, those books are going to be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. But as many of us know, they really aren't worth that much. A lot of those books you can find in bulk. Maybe not so much Spawn. Like, people do value that book a little bit higher. But let's just say X-Men 1. Well, no one's really going to give you money because every single other person owns that book. I own copies. Everyone I know will probably own a copy. Or have, or will, or whatever it may be. Because the book is so common. You see it all the time pop up in lots. Like, you know, someone's trying to move a high-end book. And, you know, there's a copy of that just, you know, kind of in the lot, kind of in the background, and you end up with another copy. Okay, so that's one of the most common reasons. It's just, you know, people not knowing, people not being aware, and people being like, oh, I had no idea that, you know, books from the 1990s or from whenever, or like, you know, great issue, all that type of stuff. I didn't know affect prices, or I didn't know these books really weren't worth so much. And that definitely does happen a lot of people just throwing stuff out there, hoping to get someone to pay their exuberant price. Next reason is people who buy at high prices themselves, and people overspend, and then they want to get their money out of the collection, but then because they've overspent, they ask for, you know, crazy, ludicrous price that no one else will pay. And that's kind of like an issue for sure. People not doing their research, people not looking into. A lot of issues that you'll see with like comics and people not really knowing a lot or making mistakes it's a knowledge issue. It's a lack of research. It's a lack of understanding. And that still happens. Even people who collect and love comics, they run into these issues as well. So, you definitely have those people who they overpay. They think, oh, if I paid this much, someone else will pay this much. Or if I paid this much, by now the books must have gone up. And that just sometimes isn't the case. Next thing is people thinking all books are kind of like around the same value. So whether it be grade, like ignoring grades and just saying, okay, well, I have a book from the 1970s and I see another copy online, or I see, you know, this book out there for this price, but my copy's in worse grade, or they see, oh, well, that book's from the 1990s. My book's from probably not 1990s, probably won't be the best example. Let's say 1960s. My book's from the 1960s. That book's from the 1960s. My book must be worth the same. And again, that's just another issue of not looking into things, not understanding grading. Grading is definitely very important. Like, you walk up, You're like, hey, I'm trying to sell this book. I see a 9.8 out there in a CGC case for X price, and my copy in a 2.0 must be worth the same amount. It must be. It can't be worth less. No, it can never be worth less. So that's something that also ends up happening. Next is people just not understanding what people like resellers will buy your collection for, or not understanding what the common collectors will buy your collection for. So let me kind of break this down. A lot of collectors, like not resellers, not like investors, not people like that, people who are just collectors, they buy what they like, they keep it forever. They're not really the people who are going to buy huge collections or really want to buy a bunch of books they don't care about. They're there because they're like, hey, I really like X book, so I want X book. I don't care about the rest of the books. Stuff like that. And, that you're usually not going to have someone like that who's going to be like, oh yeah, I want to buy a collection. And when they do, it's very unlikely that they're going to want to pay a lot for it. And then you got, of course, resellers and sometimes investors who are looking to put their money into a lot of books, stuff like that. But let's just say resellers, just to make it really easy and really simple. You go into, let's say, LCS, comic book shop, online comic book store, whatever it may be. And you're like, hey, I want to sell my comic book collection. And you have a bunch of books. And you're like, oh, I have all these books. I looked up some of them. They're like $5 each online. Or they're like $10 each online. I have 100 books. That means that my collection is worth between $500 to $1,000. Easy. Easy money. Look at this. I'm getting more money. I'm going to get so much more money out of it than what I paid for it. And the thing you have to take into consideration is that when you're dealing with a store, a resale, wherever it may be, they're going to say, hey, I'm going to buy the book. I will buy all of your books. I will take them all. They're all for me. But, you see, I can't pay full retail because, they have to make money. They're running a business. They have to figure out a way where, hey, both parties can walk away happy, where both sides will make money. But let's say all the books you bring are worth between $5 to maybe $10. And a lot of those $5 books, they aren't going to be able to sell. Like, they're going to see them and be like, well, if it's not here, if it's not something big, if it's not something desirable, and if it's super recent on top of that, like, especially on top of that, then I might be able to get $1 to $3 out of it, depending on grade, depending on all the factors that go into it, whether or not it's a popular title or not. Like, it's like the comparison of Amazing Spider-Man versus Superman. Superman's a tougher sell than ASM. ASM will sell. So they're kind of stuck in this position where they're like, hey, so I can offer you like 25 cents. On a lot of comic book shops, they're looking to pay between 10 to 25 cents for bulk books. Some will pay more. I pay more. I'm willing to buy books at a little bit of a higher price because, I'm still a small shop, still on the smaller side. So, getting that inventory is important. Getting that, capital, you could say, is important. But for these bigger shops, they're going to be like, oh, I could care less. I have 20, 30, 40 copies in the back. Like, I haven't even been able to sell those copies. So, they are going to come and be like, hey, I'll offer you like $25, $50, whatever it may be. It's going to be way less than whatever this person's thinking in their head because of the value there. They're looking at it and they're like, oh my gosh, $5 each. This is amazing. But no one's going to offer you that much. Now, of course, you can go on eBay. You can go out online and you can sell them off individually, one by one. $5 here, $3 there, $10 there. But a lot of people aren't willing to do that, especially if they're not like a store or in the space as a seller already. It can be pretty difficult as well, like, building up feedback, finding out about all this information that you need to know. All that type of stuff can be really difficult, especially if you're not really super familiar with it or haven't really learned about it. Because learning is important. It's very important to learn. But that's another thing. And then, finally, it's when people have these high-end books. These big keys and grails. And this is the exact opposite side of things. They put X number of dollars into it, or they got really lucky, they go out online, they see it selling at X price, and they're like, well, I think my copy's a little bit better. Or, I think I could get more than that price. Or, they're like, no, I just want all this gone, I want to get top dollar. Now, sometimes you can get lucky, you'll get top dollar for your books. Sometimes you'll get lucky in that regard. 2021, crazy time, I'll talk about that in a second, but 2021, crazy time. People were paying crazy money for books. Books were shooting up in value all the time. But now, and most of the time, you're not really going to get top dollar for a lot of books, even if they're like high-end keys. You might get 90%, 95% of the value there. I think that's reasonable if you're selling them off one by one. But let's say you go into a comic book shop and you want them all gone fast. You want top dollar. Again, comic book shops, hey, they like that way more than those $1 to $5 books or that $5 to $10 books the other guy was bringing in. But again, they still need to make money. They still need to have margins. They need to run business. So they're going to be like, yeah, I can give you like anywhere between 70 to 8%. Sometimes, I can get there. Just depends on the shop. Just depends on who's running it, how they're doing things. And you can get usually a pretty decent offer from a shop like with that type of stuff, at least from what I've seen. Again, this is just personal experience a lot of the time. But on the other hand, you're out there trying to sell it for above retail because you feel like your copy's better than the other copies, or you don't really look too deeply at the grading. You're like, oh, well, just from the front cover, it must be really nice. And then all of a sudden, someone checks out your book or is interested in more pictures. And then, you flip it over and you're like, ah. So there can be a lot of issues, a lot of small things that do come up that end up making, books you're trying to sell overpriced. Even if it's like a small number of high-end books, overpricing can still happen super easily. And, even if you don't own that many books, I still consider collection. I'm still going to talk about in that regard. And then next is something I want to talk about that's pretty important to this whole topic, and why I think right now you're going to see a lot of overpriced books, even though it's kind of like a down market right now, almost across the board. Not completely, but mostly across the board, it's down market. And that's because of 2021, 2022. So 2021, huge rise. Books went crazy. Silver Age, Modern Age, everything crazy, super high up. And then you look at 2022 and everything's trickling down. It's not looking good. It's going down. So people think, oh, yeah, I can sell my books for 2021 prices. Or, oh, the market's down. I need money. I need to get top dollar for these books. I need to get whatever out of them. And a lot of times that's why we're going to see some overpriced collections right now. People have to get their money out. People are looking for those higher prices still. And I see this all the time online. I see with individual books, lots of books, all that type of stuff. I mean, there's already overpricing in a lot of places if you look online. But it's pretty bad right now if people are, like, I'm talking about buy now. I'm not talking about auctions, but I'm talking about people out there on Instagram in some cases. And then also on eBay especially, you're going to see that. So, yeah, just something to be aware of. Like, overpricing definitely does happen. And, you can't just go by whatever price the person is saying. Like, there's people out there who'll be like, oh, well, I see this book in Overstreet. Or, oh, well, I've seen this book hit that sale one time in 2021. So that means it's worth that much. So, that's just kind of like an issue with it. And also, overpricing also happen when people mislead you on what's in the collection that happens. You can see overpricing. It's usually just a lack of awareness or a lack of being able to be like, well, I'm selling this to a reseller, or I'm selling this to someone, like a comic shop, whatever it may be. A lot of people will just think, oh, well, they're going to offer me top dollar. Or, well, I'm going to ask for X price and I won't take anything else. So, yeah, overpricing definitely does happen. Just something to be aware of. Very important for collecting, investing, reselling, whatever you're doing with comics. It's just important to be aware of that, and important to be able to spot it and be able to do your own fact checking and be able to come up with your own price. Don't go by someone else's price. It's for all you know, they could know nothing about books. They could just be selling books for like the first time and they're like, oh yeah, this book looks like a near again, and that's like a whole different video talking about grading and misgrading, but just for this, there's a lot of things that go into why a collection is overpriced and why people either purposefully or accidentally end up overpricing their collection. Also, there's probably like a million other examples I could go through for why something's overpriced, but those are like the main, most prominent things I see. And if you think I missed something pretty big, just let me know. I love hearing feedback. I love having discussions and chats on, these types of topics. It's pretty interesting stuff, and it's good information. So, yeah, thank you for watching.